ended your friendship with a former best friend? I guess you could say it all began back in high school. You know how it is. You meet someone, click almost instantly, and suddenly you're spending every free minute together, like you've known each other your entire lives. That's how it was with Sarah and me. We met in sophomore year, bonded over our mutual disdain for the cafeteria's rubbery pizza, and from then on, we were inseparable. She was the first person I'd text in the morning, and the last one I'd talk to at night. We survived the awkwardness of teenage years, navigated first crushes, and fought the occasional stupid argument that would have shattered any lesser friendship, but not ours. Fast forward a bit, and life moved on as it does. We went to different colleges, but distance only made us stronger. Our friendship didn't miss a beat. I remember countless late-night calls where we'd rant about professors or gush about new relationships. We even planned out our futures in detail, right down to being bridesmaids at each other's weddings. It wasn't even a question. It was just a given. She'd be standing beside me, and I'd be right there next to her when that day came. When I got married, Sarah was there. She was the first one I asked to be in my bridal. No hesitation, no second thoughts. It was one of those moments where I felt like everything was just right. Like we were fulfilling that promise we made to each other years ago. And she was amazing, supportive, excited, the whole 9 yards. I couldn't have imagined that day without her. But then, things started to shift. Not all at once, but little by little, like the slow creep of a shadow at dusk. Sarah got a job at Microsoft after graduation, which was a big deal. She was thrilled, and I was happy. We didn't see each other as often, but that was to be expected. We were adults now, with careers, bills, and all the other things that come with the so-called real world. We still talked, still laughed. But it was different. More guarded, I guess. I noticed she was spending more time with her coworkers. At first it was harmless, just happy hour after work or weekend hikes. But then it became more frequent. She'd mention these people in passing, the way you'd talk about someone you just met. And I'd think, okay, that's cool. She's making new friends, but there was this nagging feeling in the back of my mind, a tiny voice that kept asking why I wasn't being included. I brushed it off because, well, it's not like I could be there all the time. We lived in different cities now, and our lives were on separate paths. The first real blow came when she got engaged. I was over the moon for her. Genuine. I remember texting her as soon as I found out, asking about the proposal, the ring, all of it. I expected her to call me right away, like I was her person, the one she'd share every little detail with. But hours passed. Then a day. When she finally called, it felt like she was checking something off a list. The conversation was rushed, like she had better things to do. I chalked it up to excitement. Maybe she was overwhelmed, but it stung all the same. As the months went by, I waited for her to ask me to be in her wedding. It wasn't even a question in my mind. Of course I'd be there, right beside her, but that moment never came. I started to worry, wondering if I had done something wrong. Had I said something? Did I not congratulate her enough? I tried to push those thoughts away, but they kept creeping back in. Then, one day, she casually mentioned her bridesmaids. They were all people from work. Women she'd known for, 5 years? It hit me like a punch to the gut. I remember sitting there, phone in hand, just staring at the text. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. This was supposed to be our moment, the thing we'd talked about since we were kids. But suddenly, I was on the outside looking in. I tried to play it cool, pretended like it didn't bother me, but inside, I was a mess. I couldn't understand it. What had changed? Why wasn't I good enough anymore? I started replaying every interaction we'd had over the past year, looking for something, anything that would explain why she'd shut me out. As her wedding day got closer, I became more and more anxious. I didn't know how to bring it up, didn't want to make a big deal out of it, but it was eating me alive. One night, after a few too many glasses of wine, I did something stupid. I sent her a message on Instagram, pouring out everything I'd been feeling. I asked her what I'd done wrong, why she didn't want me by her side anymore, and then, in a moment of panic, I unsent it. The wedding day finally arrived, and I went through the motions like I was on autopilot. I dressed up, put on a smile, and tried my best to be happy for her. But there was this heavy weight in my chest that I just couldn't shake. The ceremony was beautiful, exactly what she'd always wanted. Outdoor venue, soft lighting, a string quartet playing in the background. But it was hard to focus on all of that when I was so painfully aware of my place in the crowd, not up there beside her where I thought I'd be. During the ceremony, I caught myself staring at her bridesmaids, these women I barely knew, and I wondered what it was about them that made them more deserving of that spot than me. Every time she looked their way, smiling, laughing, it felt like a slap in the face. I kept telling myself that I was overreacting, that it didn't matter who stood next to her, but deep down, it did. It mattered a lot. Then came the reception, which was a whole different kind of torture. I watched her dance with her new husband, the glow on her face unmistakable, and I felt this strange mix of emotions. I was genuinely happy for her, but there was also this overwhelming sadness, this sense of loss that I couldn't shake. I couldn't help but think about how things used to be between us, how we used to be so close. Now I was just another guest at her wedding, a face in the crowd. I kept my distance throughout the night, not wanting to ruin her day with my own feelings. But then, during the after party, something happened that I didn't expect. I was standing near the back of the room, nursing a drink and trying to blend in when she suddenly appeared in front of me. Her face was red, her eyes puffy and wet, and before I could say anything, she threw her arms around me, burying her head in my shoulder. She was crying hard. Her body was shaking with sobs, and all I could do was stand there, frozen, holding her as she let it all out. After what felt like an eternity, she pulled back, her face a mess of tears and smeared makeup. She looked up at me with those big, pleading eyes, and the first thing she said was, "I'm so sorry." I didn't know what to say. I just stared at her, trying to process what was happening. She started talking, the words spilling out between hiccuped sobs. She told me how much she loved me, how she never wanted to hurt, but she thought I didn't like her fiancé. Apparently, she'd been carrying this belief for months, thinking that I had some unspoken issue with the guy. I was floored. Sure, I didn't know him that well, but I never expressed any dislike. I had no idea where she got that from. She kept apologizing, saying how she thought that was why I'd been distant, why I wasn't as involved in her wedding as she'd hoped. Then it hit. She hadn't shut me out because she didn't care. She did it because she thought I didn't care about. The whole thing was a massive, tragic misunderstanding. I tried to explain that I never had any problem with her fiancé, that I was just hurt because I felt left out, but she kept interrupting, crying, saying how sorry she was for everything. I wanted to forgive her right there, to tell her it was all okay, but something in me just couldn't. The damage was done. Those months of feeling like I didn't matter, like I wasn't important to her, and they couldn't just be erased with a few tearful apologies. After a while, the tears slowed, and she started to pull herself together. She kept saying how much she missed me, how she wanted things to go back to the way they were, but I knew deep down that they never could. I told her I appreciated the apology, that I loved her too, but I could feel this wall building up inside me, something that wasn't there before. We hugged, and for a moment it felt like old times. But as soon as she walked away, I knew things would never be the same. The trust had been broken, and no amount of apologies could fix that. After the wedding, we kept in touch, more out of habit than anything else. We still talked a lot, shared funny stories, and kept each other updated on our lives. But there was this distance now, a chasm that couldn't be crossed. I found myself holding back, not sharing the deep stuff like I used to. I couldn't bring myself to be vulnerable with her anymore. Not after what happened. It's funny how one moment can change everything. We went from being best friends who could tell each other anything to, well, I don't even know what we are now. Acquaintances. Friends, but not really. All I know is that the deep bond we once had is gone, and it's not coming back. Every now and then, I think about what happened, and it still stings. I miss the way things were, but I also know that I can't go back. Trust is fragile, and once it's broken, it's hard to repair. I've made peace with it, mostly. I still care about her, and I'll always treasure the memories we made, but I've learned to keep my guard. Some people aren't meant to stay in your life forever, and that's okay. I'll never forget the way she broke down in front of me, how sorry she was, how much she said she loved, but I'll also never forget how I felt standing there, holding her while my heart broke. I guess that's just part of life, learning to let go, even when it hurts.